Tonight, we step quietly behind the Iron Curtain. Not into the world of spies or missiles or the shadowed men Western films love to invent, but into something far more ordinary and in its own way far more strange. We are going into the daily life of a Soviet citizen. The alarm clock, the bread line, the shared bathroom, the silence on the tram. So pull your blanket close, let your breathing slow, and let us drift together into a world that no longer exists, but that millions of people once simply called home. It is 1953. Stalin has just died, though his presence still clings to every corridor and every careful silence. You wake in Leningrad, in a single room that belongs to your family. Not an apartment, a room, roughly 150 square feet that serves as your bedroom, your dining space, your sitting room, and your storage. Everything you own fits within these walls. Your parents sleep on a fold-out bed against the opposite wall. Your clothes hang on hooks because there is no space for a wardrobe. The concept of private space is something you understand differently here. Not as something you possess, but as something you negotiate daily with the 7 other families sharing your floor. The sounds arrive before full wakefulness does. A pot clanging somewhere down the shared corridor. An argument about who used the last of the sugar. The ancient pipes groaning through their morning labor. A child crying in the next room. The walls are thick, but the doors are thin. And sound moves through this building the way water moves through cracked stone. You lie still for a moment, cataloging the morning, before swinging your legs over the side of the narrow bed that doubles as a couch during the day. 8 families share a single bathroom. This is not a complaint. This is simply the arrangement. Everyone knows it. Everyone navigates it. There is an unwritten schedule, observed the way people observe gravity, not because anyone enforces it, but because ignoring it would make everything collapse. 15 minutes per family in the morning. You count them carefully. You grab your towel, your small toiletry kit, and step into the long corridor with its single yellow bulb and its peeling wallpaper, each layer beneath revealing another decade of Soviet history. Sometimes the bathroom is occupied longer than expected. You lean against the wall and wait. The factory foreman from the room near the entrance waits beside you. He nods. You nod back. This is neighborliness here, measured not in warmth, but in small mercies, the giving of way, the nod. Complaining, the quiet understanding that everyone is doing the same thing and deserves roughly the same consideration. When you finally enter, the hot water is actually hot. This is a good sign. Not guaranteed, but today it arrives and you move through your routine in 7 minutes, because 8 would be inconsiderate. Back in the room, your mother is already heating water on the small electric burner that is technically prohibited, but that every family has anyway. The samovar, a family piece that somehow survived the revolution, the Civil War, and the siege, sits ready on the table. Tea is the first certainty of the day. Most other things require some form of negotiation. Your father rose before dawn to stand in the bread line. He does this 3 times a week, alternating with a neighbor down the hall who does the same on the other days. Fresh bread is one of the reliable pleasures of Soviet life. The state keeps it affordable, but availability still requires presence, and presence requires time, and time must be organized between people who are willing to trust each other with small and important things. Your mother mentions there may be oranges at the state food shop 3 blocks away. The word itself carries a kind of weight. Oranges arrive rarely in Leningrad, traveling up from Soviet, Georgia, or sometimes from further abroad, and their scarcity makes them something closer to occasions than to fruit. If she is lucky enough to secure one this afternoon, it will be held for New Year still. Months away, kept in anticipation the way something precious ought to be kept. You eat quickly, standing buckwheat porridge with a spoonful of sugar. You pull on your coat, heavy wool, practical rather than stylish. Style is not the priority here. Functionality is the priority, and warmth. You check yourself briefly in the small mirror near the door and find that you look exactly like everyone else heading out into the gray October morning, which is, in a country built around collective identity, precisely the point. The stairwell smells of cabbage and old tobacco. The lift has been broken as long as anyone in this building can remember. You descend 5 flights, your footsteps echoing against the stone, and step out into a drizzle that is not quite rain, but enough to dampen the morning. The tram stop is already crowded with workers heading to the early shift. When the tram comes, it is already full, but everyone compresses somehow, bodies pressed together in the practiced intimacy of people who have long since learned not to acknowledge it. The tram moves through Leningrad the way memory moves, through a person who has seen great changes and decided to keep going. Imperial buildings divided into communal flats, newer apartment blocks thrown up quickly after the war to address a housing shortage that was never quite fully addressed. Baroque facades alongside constructivist workers, clubs alongside the heavy, ornamental architecture of the Stalin era. The city is a stratigraphic record of decisions made at enormous cost, and you move through it every morning without remarking on it, the way people move through their own histories. Through fogged windows, you catch glimpses of other lines. Women with string bags waiting outside shops that may or may not have what they came for. Street sweepers in orange vests, propaganda posters showing workers whose expressions suggest a joy in labor that the faces inside the tram do not quite match. This is not bitterness. It is simply the difference between the image a system makes of itself and the quiet endurance that actually keeps it running from one day to the next. The factory gates open at a fixed hour. The guard barely glances at your papers. He sees you every day. Inside, the changing room fills with the low conversation of people removing their street lives and putting on their work lives, discussing who has heard about a delivery of winter boots at the department store, whose child has developed a fever, whether this month's production numbers will earn everyone a bonus. Your job is operating a lathe, shaping metal components for tractors that will go to collective farms across the country. The work is repetitive, but not without its own satisfaction. You watch raw metal become a precise and useful thing under your hands, and in that there is something worth acknowledging, even if the official language around the meaning of labor has been repeated so many times it has worn smooth and lost its edges. The morning passes in muscle memory. Around you, quotas are met or adjusted or quietly reported as met when they are not entirely. Materials run short and corners are cut. When a machine breaks down and the replacement part from the other city has not arrived, you find Petro from maintenance, a man near retirement who has been improvising repairs for equipment that should have been replaced years ago, and together you find something in the workshop that will hold. This is how Soviet factories actually function. Not through the plan, but through the web of people who know what others have quietly set aside and who owe each other small, remembered favors. 9 years pass. Stalin has been gone nearly a decade. Khrushchev has introduced what people cautiously refer to as the thaw, a slight loosening of the cold that settled into everything during the previous decades. People speak a little more openly now, though the habit of measured speech does not leave quickly from a people who spent years practicing it. You have been promoted. You have moved to Moscow. And most significantly, you now have your own apartment. Not a room in a communal flat, but an actual one-bedroom unit in one of the new 5-story residential buildings spreading across the city in long, identical rows. The walls are thin. The kitchen is small. But the bathroom is yours alone, and you cannot easily overstate what that means to someone who spent years carefully timing their mornings around the schedules of 7 other families. The daily routine transforms quietly but completely. You wake to your own alarm instead of your neighbor's sounds. The bathroom is free whenever you need it. You prepare breakfast in a kitchen that belongs to no one but you, at your own pace, without checking a clock. These are small freedoms, but they carry a weight that larger freedoms sometimes do not, because you understand precisely what their absence felt like, and that understanding does not fade quickly. Across the city, a 13-year-old named Natasha is tying a red pioneer scarf around her neck before school. She has done it so many times, the knot comes without conscious thought. Almost all Soviet children between 9 and 14 are pioneers, members of the Vladimir Lenin All-Union Pioneer Organization, a structure that teaches civic duty, collective responsibility, and the basic principles of socialist life. The scarf is more than a piece of cloth. It is a symbol of belonging to something larger than the individual, and in the Soviet Union, belonging to something larger than the individual is not a choice so much as the default condition of childhood. Her school day begins at 8:30 and runs 6 days a week. The curriculum is identical across the entire country. A child in Moscow learns from the same textbooks as a child in Vladivostok. Mathematics is rigorous, sciences are thorough, and literature is filtered through an ideological lens that presents the great Russian writers as critics of the old order and early voices of what was to come. By the time Soviet students finish secondary school, they have covered algebra, geometry, calculus, physics, chemistry, and biology at levels that would satisfy university entrance requirements across most of the Western world, though few Soviet students are in a position to make that comparison directly. After school, Natasha's day continues. Choir practice, or chess club, or a technical workshop, or community service organized through the Pioneer Troop. These activities are not experienced as impositions by most children. They are simply the texture of growing up here. The structure that fills the space between school and dinner. The context in which real friendships quietly form. By 1975, Natasha is 25, working as an engineer at a Moscow research facility, living alone in a small apartment allocated through her workplace after 2 years on the waiting list. The furniture is standard Soviet issue, the same wall. Units and sofa combinations available in state stores from one end of the country to the other. But the shelves hold books that took years to collect. There is a handmade textile on one wall, plants on the small balcony, and these accumulated personal things make the standardized space unmistakably hers. On certain evenings, she gathers a small circle of close friends. Olga the doctor, Victor from the Research Institute, Irina, who now teaches literature at a secondary school. They arrive with a bottle of Soviet sparkling wine. Remove their shoes at the door as everyone does, and move almost immediately to the kitchen as everyone does, because in Soviet apartments the kitchen is where the real conversation happens. The living room is for guests who have not yet earned a deeper kind of welcome. The kitchen is for people who have. The food is simple and represents genuine effort. A grated vegetable salad, boiled potatoes, pickles her mother prepared from last summer's garden, a cake improvised around whatever ingredients happen to be available that week rather than whatever the original recipe required. This is Soviet domestic life in practice, not a failure of imagination, but an expression of it. The constant practice of making something generous from what the system has left you to work with. The conversation at the table moves the way such conversations always move. From news about mutual friends to books to films, to the things that cannot be comfortably said outside this room. Not organized opposition, not anything that would be called resistance, but the quiet acknowledgement among trusted people that the official account of how things are does not always correspond to the experience of living through them. Victor mentions that his department has not received new equipment in 3 years. They are supposed to be developing advanced technology using machines that are 15 years old. Others nod. Everyone has a version of this story. The gap between what is officially claimed and what is privately known has become so familiar it is almost comfortable, a shared understanding that creates its own kind of intimacy among people who have learned which rooms and which company make honesty possible. Soviet citizens of this era develop a kind of quiet dual fluency. They know how to speak in official registers when the occasion requires it, and they know how to speak differently among those who have earned that trust. Over time, most people do not experience this as painful contradiction. They experience it as navigation. The system is the weather. You do not argue with the weather. You learn what to wear in it. You find shelter when you need to, and you keep moving through it from one ordinary day to the next. Outside, the city settles into another night. The metro runs less frequently. The shops are dark and locked. Natasha turns off the lamp and lies in the quiet of her apartment, her life constructed carefully inside, a structure she did not choose and has never seriously imagined overthrowing, only enduring, and occasionally in the small warm light of her kitchen surrounded by people she trusts, briefly and quietly transcending